here, late at night. Road empty, mind loud. This is where the truth shows up. Not the version people see. The version you don't talk about. The one that's tired. The one that kept going anyway. You ever notice something? The people who carry the most are usually the quietest about it. They don't complain. They don't ask for help. They just handle it. Again and again. And again. That's the hero. Not the one in the movies. Not the one with the spotlight. The real one. The one people depend on. The one that always shows up. No matter what. No matter how they feel. No matter how tired they are. You became that person. Maybe without even realizing it. One favor turned into 10. One sacrifice turned into a habit. And before you knew it, you were the one everyone called. The reliable one. The strong one. The one who always figures it out. And yeah, that sounds like a compliment. Until it isn't. Because nobody asks how you're holding up. They just assume you are. That's the part no one talks about. Being the hero means nobody checks on you. Because in their mind, you don't need it. You're the one who helps. Not the one who needs help. So you keep going. You keep showing up. Even when you're running on empty. You ever hit that point? Where you're tired. But you don't stop. Not because you can't. But because people are counting on you. That's pressure. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind you carry alone. The kind nobody sees. And the crazy part? Because you built that image. You taught people that you can handle everything. So now, they believe it. Even when it's not true anymore. Even when you're drained. Even when you're barely holding it together. You still show up. Because that's who you are. Or at least, that's who you've been. But something starts to change. Slow at first. Almost unnoticeable. You start to feel it. That exhaustion that doesn't go away with sleep. That weight that doesn't lift. That silence when you need someone. And that's when it hits you. Not all at once, but enough to feel it. The hero never gets saved. Not in real life. Not out here. No one is coming. No one is checking in. No one is showing up the way you do. And that realization, it changes something inside you. Because now, you have a choice. Keep being everything for everyone. Or finally, be something for yourself. That thought feels wrong at first. Almost selfish. Almost uncomfortable. Because that's not who you've been. You've been the one who gives. Not the one who takes. But what happens when there's nothing left to give? What happens when you finally feel it? That emptiness. That burnout. That quiet voice saying, something has to change. Because this isn't sustainable. Not like this. Not forever. And deep down, you already know what that change is. You have to save yourself. And that sounds simple. Until you actually try to do it. Because saving yourself means something has to stop. Something has to change. Some people lose access. Some habits have to die. Some versions of you don't get to come forward. And that's the part people hate. They love your healing. Until your healing affects them. They love your growth. Until your growth creates boundaries. They love the idea of self-love. Until self-love says no. That's when it gets real. That's when people start looking at you different. Not because you became cruel. Not because you became heartless. But because you stopped abandoning yourself. And to some people, that feels like betrayal. Because they were used to the old you. The one who overextended. The one who answered every call. The one who dropped everything. The one who made it work. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. But eventually, you start asking yourself questions. Real questions. Hard questions. Who saves me? Who checks on me? Who notices when I'm not okay? Who shows up when I finally can't? And sometimes, the answer is nobody. That answer hurts. But it also frees you. Because once you know nobody is coming, you stop waiting. You stop looking over your shoulder. You stop hoping someone finally notices. And slowly, you start noticing yourself. You start paying attention to your own exhaustion, your own pain, your own needs. And that is where the hero changes. Not into a villain. Into someone awake. Someone who finally sees the pattern. Someone who finally understands. Saving everyone else while losing yourself is not noble. It is slow destruction. And nobody claps. When you destroy yourself quietly, they just get comfortable with it. They call it loyalty. They call it love. They call it being dependable. But sometimes, it is just you disappearing. One sacrifice at a time. And that is not love. Not real love. Because real love doesn't require you to erase yourself. Real love doesn't demand that you bleed quietly. Real love sees you too. And if it never sees you, then maybe it was never love. Maybe it was comfort. Maybe it was access. Maybe it was convenience. And that realization is heavy. Because now you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending it doesn't hurt. You can't keep telling yourself, this is just what strength looks like. Because strength is not suffering forever. Strength is not being silent. Strength is not letting yourself break. So everyone else stays comfortable. Sometimes strength is walking away. Sometimes strength is saying no. Sometimes strength is choosing peace. Even when people call it selfish. And that's where the story changes. Because the hero finally realizes they cannot keep saving people who never cared if they drowned. They cannot keep carrying people who never asked if their back hurt. They cannot keep being the shelter while standing in the storm alone. So one day, they stop. Not because they hate anyone. Not because they stopped caring. But because for the first time, they finally care about themselves too. And that right there is when people start rewriting the story. They forget what you did. They forget what you gave. They forget how many times you saved them before. And suddenly, You're not the hero anymore. At least not in their story. Because the moment you changed, their comfort changed too. And people notice that fast. Not the years you showed up, but the one time you didn't. Not the sacrifices you made, but the boundary you set. That's how quickly it flips. That's how quickly people forget. And yeah, that part stings. Because you remember everything. You remember the late nights. You remember the stress. You remember the times you put yourself last, just to make sure they were okay. And now, they act like none of it mattered. Like it was expected. Like it was just your role. And maybe that's the truth. Not because you deserve that, but because you trained them. You showed them. You would always be there. No matter the cost. So when the cost finally became too much, they didn't understand. Because to them, nothing changed. Except you. And that's when the labels start. Selfish. Cold. Distant. Different. You changed. And they're right. You did. But not in the way they think. You didn't become worse. You became aware. You became honest. You became someone who finally sees their own worth. And that's uncomfortable. For people who benefited from you not seeing it. That's the part nobody wants to admit. Some people don't love you. They love what you did for them. They love how available you were. How reliable you were. How easy you made their life. And the moment that changes, their perception changes too. Not because you hurt them, but because you stopped helping them the same way. And that's when the story gets twisted. That's when the hero starts getting painted as the villain. Not because they turned evil, but because they stopped sacrificing. Because they stopped bleeding quietly. Because they stopped being the easy answer. And people don't like losing easy answers. They don't like losing access. They don't like losing control. Even if they never realized they had it. So they push back. They question you. They test your boundaries. They try to pull you back into the version of you they liked more. The version of you that gave more. The version of you that asked for less. And this is where it gets hard. Because part of you wants to go back. Wants to fix it. Wants to be liked again. Wants to be needed again. Because being needed felt like purpose. It felt like value. It felt like you mattered. But there's a difference between being needed and being valued. Needed means they rely on what you do. Valued means they respect who you are. And a lot of people only knew you for what you did. Not for who you are. So when what you do changes, they think you changed completely. They don't see the growth. They don't see the healing. They only see what they lost. And that's why it feels so unfair. Because you didn't become less. You became more. More aware. More grounded. More protective of your energy. And somehow, that gets mistaken for something negative. That gets labeled as selfish. That gets turned into a problem. And if you're not careful, you start believing it. You start questioning yourself. Wondering if you went too far. Wondering if you should go back. Wondering if saving yourself was a mistake. But deep down, you know wasn't a mistake. You know something had to change. Because the way things were was slowly breaking you. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Day by day. Sacrifice by sacrifice. And nobody noticed. Or maybe they just didn't look. Because it was easier that way. Easier to let you handle it. Easier to trust that you would figure it out. And you always did. Until you couldn't. Until something inside you said, "This has to stop." And that voice, it didn't come from nowhere. It came from all the moments you ignored yourself. All the times you said yes when you wanted to say no. All the times you stayed when you should have walked away. All the times you gave when you had nothing left. That voice built over time. Quiet at first. Easy to ignore. But eventually, it got loud enough that you couldn't ignore it anymore. And that's when the shift happened. Not overnight, but intentionally. You started choosing yourself. In small ways first. Saying no when you meant it. Taking space when you needed it. Resting without guilt. And at first, that felt wrong. It felt uncomfortable. It felt like you were letting people down. Because that's what you were taught. That your value came from what you gave, not from who you are. So when you stopped giving the same way, it felt like losing part of yourself. But here's the truth. You weren't losing yourself. The version of you that existed before the expectations, before the pressure, before you became everything for everyone. That version was always there, just buried under responsibility, under expectation, under the need to be strong. And now, you're uncovering it. Little by little. Choice by choice. Boundary by boundary. And yeah, it's not easy. Because growth never is. Especially when it changes how people see you. Especially when it changes how people treat you. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's different. And different is what you needed. Because staying the same was slowly destroying you. And no one is worth losing yourself for. Not a job. Not a relationship. Not approval. Not acceptance. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with yourself. You're the one who has to carry your mind, your energy, your peace. And if you lose that, trying to be everything for everyone, what do you really have left? That's the question nobody asks. Until it's too late. Until they're exhausted. Until they're burned out. Until they don't recognize themselves anymore. And you saw that coming. You felt it early. And instead of ignoring it, you did something about it. Even though it was hard. Even though people didn't understand. Even though it changed everything. Because deep down, you knew something important. If you don't choose yourself, no one else will. And that realization, it hits different. Because now you see it clearly. Not through emotion, but through truth. You were giving everything to people who never asked if you were okay. You were showing up for people who never showed up for you. And for a long time, you convinced yourself that was fine. That it meant you were strong. That it meant you were different. That it meant you were built for it. But strength isn't measured by how much you can carry. It's measured by what you refuse to carry anymore. And that's the shift. The moment you decide, this weight isn't mine anymore. That responsibility isn't mine to carry. That expectation isn't mine to live up to. And when you start putting things down, people notice. Because they were used to you carrying it. They were used to you handling it. They were used to you being the solution. So when you stop, they feel it immediately. And instead of asking why, they question you. Instead of understanding, they react. Because your growth forces them to adjust. And not everyone is ready for that. Not everyone wants that. Some people would rather you stay the same, so they don't have to. And that's when it hits hardest. Because now you see who really supports you. And who only supported what you provided. That difference. It's everything. Because real support doesn't disappear when you change. Real support doesn't punish you for growing. Real support doesn't make you feel guilty for choosing yourself. And once you feel that difference, you can't go back. You can't unsee it. You can't pretend anymore. Because pretending is what kept you stuck. Pretending drained. Pretending is what almost broke you. So now, you choose differently. Not perfectly, but intentionally. You choose your peace. You choose your energy. You choose your sanity. And yeah, people will have something to say about that. They'll call it selfish. They'll call it cold. They'll call it a change. But what they're really reacting to is losing access to the version of you that made their life easier. And that's not your responsibility. It never was. You were just conditioned to believe it was. Conditioned to believe that your worth came from what you gave. That your value came from what you sacrificed. That your role was to be everything for everyone. But roles can change. And sometimes they have to. Because if they don't, you lose yourself playing them. And you were getting close to that. Closer than you realized. Closer than you wanted to admit. So you made a decision. A hard one. An uncomfortable one. But a necessary one. You chose yourself. Not over others, but alongside yourself. For the first time. And that's when everything shifted. Because now, you're not just surviving. You're actually living. Actually breathing. Actually feeling like yourself again. And no label. No opinion. No misunderstanding. Is worth giving that up. Not anymore. Not after everything you've realized. Not after everything you've felt. Because now you know what it costs to lose yourself. And you're not paying that price again. notice things you didn't before. Patterns. Energy. Intentions. You start paying attention to how people show up. Not just when it's easy, but when it's not. You start noticing who reaches out and who only responds, who gives back and who only takes, who supports you and who just benefits from you. And the more you see, the harder it is to ignore. The harder it is to go back. Because awareness changes everything. It changes how you think, how you move, how you give, and most importantly, how you protect yourself. Because now you understand something you didn't before. Not everyone deserves the same version of you. Not everyone deserves the same access. Not everyone deserves the same energy. And that doesn't make you wrong. That makes you aware. That makes you intentional. That makes you someone who finally understands their own value. And when you understand your value, you stop giving it away for free. You stop overextending. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to be understood by people who never tried to understand you. You just become clear. Clear in your boundaries. Clear in your intentions. Clear in your priorities. And clarity can feel harsh to people who are used to confusion, used to you bending, used to you adjusting, used to you making things easier for them. But clarity is not cruelty. Boundaries are not punishment. And choosing yourself is not a betrayal. It just feels like one to people who benefited from you not doing it. And job is not to keep everyone comfortable. Your job is to keep yourself whole, to protect your peace, to maintain your energy, to show up for your own life the way you used to show up for everyone else. And when you do that, something powerful happens. You stop feeling drained all the time. You stop feeling resentful. You stop feeling like you're constantly giving and getting nothing back. Because now, you're not giving from emptiness. You're giving from alignment, from choice, from a place that actually has something to give. And that changes everything. Because now, your energy is intentional. Your time is respected. Your presence is real. Not forced. Not obligated. But chosen. And the people who understand that, they stay. They respect it. They appreciate it. Because they were never there just for what you gave. They were there for you. And those people, they matter. More than the ones who left. More than the ones who judged. More than the ones who couldn't adjust. Because real connection doesn't depend on you being everything. It depends on you being real. And for the first time, that's exactly what you are. Not perfect. Not always understood. But real. And that's enough. More than enough. Because now, you're not trying to be the hero anymore. You're just trying to be yourself. And that takes more courage than anything. More than people realize. And this is where it all comes together. Everything you felt, everything you carried, everything you learned, it finally makes sense. because you realize something simple, but powerful. You were never meant to save everyone. That was never your role. That was never your responsibility. You just took it on because you cared, because you had a good heart, because you didn't want to see people struggle the way you did. And there's nothing wrong with that. There never was. But somewhere along the way, you forgot about yourself. You forgot that you mattered too. That your needs matter. That your peace matters. And now, you're remembering. Not because someone reminded you, but because you had to. Because life forced you to. Because ignoring it was no longer an option. And yeah, that comes with consequences. People leaving. People judging. People misunderstanding. But those consequences are part of the process. Because not everyone is meant to grow with you. Not everyone is meant to stay. And that's not failure. That's alignment. That's life making room for what actually fits. For what actually respects you. For what actually sees you. And once you accept that, you stop fighting it. You stop chasing people who only valued what you gave. You stop proving yourself to people who never saw your worth. You just let it be. And in that space, you find peace. Real peace. Not the kind that comes from approval, but the kind that comes from alignment, from knowing. You did what was right for you. Even if it wasn't right for everyone else. And that's when the label doesn't matter anymore. Hero. Villain. It's all perspective. Because in someone else's story, you'll always be something. But in your own story, you get to decide. And maybe you were never meant to be a hero. Not in the way you thought. Maybe you were meant to be whole, to be balanced, to be someone who gives without losing themselves. Someone who loves without abandoning themselves. Someone who shows up without disappearing in the process. Because that is real strength. Not sacrifice without limit. Not giving until there's nothing left. But knowing when to stop. Knowing when to choose yourself. And standing on that choice. Even when it's misunderstood. Even when it's judged. Even when it costs you people. Because at the end of the day, losing people who only valued your sacrifice is not a loss. It's a release. A necessary one. So you can finally become who you were meant to be. Not the hero everyone needed, but the person you needed all along. And that's the truth. The hero never gets saved. So one day, they learn to save themselves. And if that makes them the villain in someone else's story, so be it. Because in their own story, they finally made it out. They finally found peace. They finally chose themselves. And that is not villainy. That's freedom. That's growth. That's everything. And once you feel that freedom, someone else, while running yourself dry. And now, you flipped that. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Out of survival. Out of growth. Because survival turns into awareness. And awareness turns into discipline. The discipline to choose yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's misunderstood, even when it's lonely. Because there will be moments where it feels lonely, where the silence is louder than before, where the absence of people feels heavier than their presence ever did. And that's normal. Because you're not just losing people. You're losing patterns. Losing habits. Losing a version of yourself that you lived as for a long time. And that takes adjustment. That takes time. That takes patience with yourself. Because you're rebuilding. Not from nothing, but from truth. From clarity. From a place that actually supports you. And that foundation, it's stronger than anything you had before. Because it's real. Not forced. Not performative. Not built on expectation. Built on alignment. Built on self-respect. Built on truth. And once you have that, you don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need validation from people who never saw you. You don't need approval from people who only valued your output. You don't need to explain why you chose yourself. Because you lived the reason. You felt the cost. You experienced what happens when you don't. And that's enough. More than enough. So now, you move forward. Not as the hero, grows. That's the one that builds something real. Something sustainable. Something that doesn't cost you yourself. And yeah, not everyone will understand it. Not everyone will respect it. But the right ones will. The ones who see you, not for what you give, but for who you are. And those are the ones worth keeping. The ones worth building with. The ones worth showing up for. Not because you have to, but because you want to. And that's the difference. That's the shift. That's the growth. So if you're out here feeling like the villain for finally choosing yourself, just remember this. You didn't become the villain. You just stopped being what everyone was comfortable with. You stopped being what everyone expected. You stopped being someone who forgot themselves. And that is not something to feel guilty about. That's something to be proud of. Because not everyone gets there. Not everyone has the courage to break that pattern. To face that truth. To choose themselves. When it costs them comfort. When it costs them people. When it costs them everything. Except who they really are. And in the end, that's what matters. Not the labels. Not the opinions. Not the stories people tell about you. But the truth you live. The peace you protect. The life you build. When you finally choose yourself. So keep riding. Keep growing. Keep choosing yourself. Even when it's hard. Even when it's quiet. Even when nobody understands. Because one day, you'll look back and realize that moment you was yourself was the moment everything changed. The moment you stopped surviving and started living. The moment you stopped being what everyone needed and became what you needed. And that is the real story. Not the hero. Not the villain. Just you. Finally becoming whole. Finally becoming free. Finally becoming yourself. And that's enough. More than enough. Out here. On this ride. That's the only thing that matters. And if you made it this far, just know you're not alone in this. Not even close. There are people out here learning the same lesson, breaking the same pattern, choosing themselves for the first time too. And that's something worth holding on to, worth building on, worth continuing. So keep going, no matter what it looks like, no matter who understands, no matter who doesn't. Because this path, this growth, this version of you, it's worth it. Every step of it. Every moment of it. Every choice that led you here. And it all started with one decision: to stop waiting for someone else to save you. And finally, save yourself. And that right there is where everything begins, not ends. Begins. So keep riding. And don't look back. Not this time. Not anymore. You already know. just finally see it. Clear as day. Even in the dark. And that's the ride. That's the lesson. That's the truth. Carry it with you. Wherever you go next. Because you're going to need it. And when you do, you'll remember this moment. This ride. This decision. To finally choose yourself. No matter what. And that's how you win. Not by saving everyone else, but by refusing to lose yourself. Ever again. That's the difference now. That's the line. And you don't cross it anymore. Not for anyone. Not for anything. Because now you know what it costs. And you're done paying it. For good. This time, it's different. This time, it's real. This time, it's you. Finally. Fully. Unapologetically. And that's the ending. That turns into a beginning. Right here, right now. And if you're still here, after the ride, after the message, after everything, I just want to say thank you for riding with me, for listening, for being part of this. Throttle and Wisdom is still growing, still learning, still finding its way. But every ride matters. Every comment matters. Every person who stays matters more than you know. So if nobody told you today, I'm proud of you. Keep going. Keep choosing yourself. Keep eventually, the road opens up. And when it does, I hope you're still here with me. From the bottom of my heart. Thank you for riding After Hours.